to the service this morning. I was listening to Sirius XM radio in my car, and TED.com was on, and I was listening to a story that was so incredible and really ties in with the talk this morning. The talk this morning is about starting the new year with virtue. In other words, trying to establish a virtue that can become the key note for the year. And this young fellow, his name is Bill Strickland, was talking about a vocational center that he started in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And the whole purpose of the vocational center is to create beauty. So as I started to listen to this story, I thought, okay, we're going to be talking about, cosmetics and how to make up, women and men who are brave enough to wear cosmetics, I guess. But I was so surprised. It was just the opposite. It was truly beauty in the sense that we understand beauty. This is a vocational center that he started in the really dark and bad part of Pittsburgh. And it was, it's a vocational center designed for the youth. He said that, and I'm really condensing his beautiful story of how this all came about, but the purpose of this vocational center is to inspire 400 students in the grade schools, giving them hope and inspiration about the future. And he discovered that beauty is the source of their inspiration. So they have, for example, they had the chef talking on this program, and the chef was talking how he designed a particular food in such a beautiful way that it inspired hope, or generated hope, in these 400 youth as to how to eat perfectly, how to eat beauty, as opposed to fast food, I'm assuming. Every floor, as he was describing, it sounded like there were 3 different floors to the center, and I think the center is called Manchester something. I couldn't quite understand what the something was, but it's Manchester is the first part of that, the name of that center. But as he was describing the first floor and what they do on the second floor and the third floor, I couldn't help but think of the Master Institute of Arts that the Rourkes had developed, back in the early 1900s, where they were doing ceramics and painting and music and all things for culture. And what was so exciting to me is that he said of these 400 students that were all failing in school, when they went through this program of beauty, let's call it, 88% have gone to college. What a statistic, what power beauty has. So I wanted to share that with you. You can hear more of the story if you go to TED.com. Okay. So I wanted to start the new year with a sense of direction and to choose a virtue as a keynote for our year. We can choose a virtue for the group, like we were working with in our meditation this morning, or we can choose a virtue and think about it that will inspire not only the group but for our individual self as well, because what we do for ourselves flows right into the group, just like what we do for the group flows into our own personal life. I think it is important for each of us to acknowledge the new year by establishing a sense of new beginnings. So, this may sound strange, but with multiple marriages, how we are told, don't take the previous marriage into the next marriage. Well, it's the same thing, so to speak. Let's not take the old year into the new year. let us think about new beginnings. So if we can choose a virtue that particularly speaks to us, individually as a group, let's then let that virtue be a keynote so that everything, all that we create, all that we compose in our mind and we want to bring into manifestation this year will be aligned and harmonized with that virtue, which we will call the keynote for our coming year. So creating a keynote for the year is a wonderful and constructive way to establish a new beginning for 2014. Creating a keynote is comparable to a composer writing a new piece of music which will inspire the world. There is an article in USA Today in the year 2007 about new beginnings for American women. And I'm going to quote what was from that article. You're going to love this because it's going to bring the past back, and I'm sorry about bringing the past, but this is so beautiful because it's a reflection of the Agni Yoga teachings talking about the new era of women. So we might even consider the year 2007 as a pivotal point for new beginnings for women. Anyway, the article says this. Representative Nancy Pelosi of California took the speaker's gavel in what she called a historic moment for women of America. Remember that back then? Yeah. Congress convened last Thursday, it says in the article, for the 110th time in the nation's history, but for the first time with a woman heading one of the chambers. That was a keynote moment for the United States. And that article was written in the USA Today, January 5th, 2007. So that led me to read some of the writings of Eleanor Roosevelt. As I read her notes, I realized she was talking about a great keynote, the virtue of striving and independence of thought. So striving and independence of thought might be one of the keynotes or virtues you would choose for yourself for this year. I was so inspired that I wanted to share her writings with you this morning. There's a point in her writings where she said, I came to the conclusion that you had to use this life to develop the very best within yourself that you could develop. This is, of course, is possible only through the virtue of striving. Now, let me read to you what I read from her writings. She said, it seems to me, this is very small print, so hopefully I can see it. It seems to me a very difficult thing to put into words the beliefs we hold and what they make you do in your life. I think I was fortunate because I grew up in a family where there was a very deep religious feeling. I don't think it was spoken of a great deal. It was more or less taken for granted that everybody held certain beliefs and needed certain reinforcements of their own strength. And that came through their belief in God and their knowledge of prayer. But as I grew older, I questioned a great many of the things that I knew very well my grandmother who brought me up had taken for granted. And I think I might have been quite a difficult person to live with if it hadn't have been for the fact that my husband once said, well, it didn't do you any harm to learn those things, so why not let your children learn them? When they grow up, They'll think things out for themselves. And that gave me a feeling, she said, that perhaps that's what we all had to do. To think out for ourselves what we could believe and how we could live by it. So I came to the conclusion that you had to use this life to develop the very best that you could develop. I don't know whether I believe in a future life. I believe that all you go through here must have some value. Therefore, there must be some reason. And there must be some going on. How exactly that happens, I've never been able to decide. There is a future. That I am sure of. But how? That I don't know. And I came to feel that it didn't really matter very much, because whatever the future held, you'd have to face it when you came to it. Just as whatever life holds, you have to face it in exactly the same way. And the important thing was that you never let down the best that you were able to do. It might be poor because you might not have very much within you to give, or to help other people with, or to live your life with. But as long as you did the very best that you were able to do, then that was what you were put here to do. And that was what you were accomplishing by being here. And she wraps it up by saying, and so I have tried to follow that out and not to worry about the future or what was going to happen. I think I am pretty much of a fatalist, she said. You have to accept whatever comes. And the only important thing is that you meet it with courage and with the best that you have to give. Isn't that great? I just was so inspired with it. What a dear and intelligent woman. This great lady also mentioned another virtue, that of courage, right at the end of her article. And in her life's work, she personified the virtue of service. Perhaps service is one of the greatest virtues there is, to be a person of service. So this morning, I'm going to talk about striving and courage and service as possible keynotes with which we may want to start our new year. So I'll start with striving. In the teachings, we learned that striving is one of the virtues of the inner lotus. This virtue begins to unfold when the rhythm of our true self is activated. So we have to think about that. The rhythm of our true self is activated. Because of our time restrictions here, I can't go into all of this, but you'll find it in the teaching to think about in meditation, what does it mean, the rhythm of our true self? And how does that rhythm and the true self relate to our purpose in life? So again, this virtue of striving begins to unfold when the rhythm of the self is activated. Then there is an urge within our nature to adapt our life, our personality life, to the downpouring rhythm of that true self. So if you're a musician, or if you just love music, you know how some music produces a rhythm which really speaks to you. I was thinking, even in the Nicholas Roerich paintings, in those paintings, there is a rhythm. So it may not sound to the physical ear as harmony or rhythm or music, but our soul feels it. And whether we're listening to music or reading poetry or looking at the artwork of a master, we're going to be, their work is going to put us in rhythm, in harmony with the downward flow of our true self. Striving helps to eliminate the obstacles of our physical and emotional and mental bodies, making them adapt themselves to this new rhythm. Oh, there's so much we could talk about. But I won't, I'll go on. Okay, so we'll get through the talk. What may be a new idea to some of us is that striving does not originate from our mind. Striving does not originate from our mind, even from our emotions or our sense of determination. It comes from the core of our being, the inner essence of our being. When this essence begins to expand, it puts our bodies into a new rhythm, which leads to purification and right unfoldment. So right unfoldment is a balanced unfoldment of our inner life, which leads us to a state of harmony and joy. In other words, striving puts our personality life in tune with our inner core. See how that works? I think it is so incredible. So it is at this point in our incarnation where we begin to eliminate things from our life which are not favorable to the labor or the service we are doing to improve ourselves, our environment, our community, and so on and so forth. In striving, we must first create an environment in which we have contact with the self. So how do you do that? Well, you find a discipleship group whose core is focused and aligned with hierarchy. That's one way. Another way is to put your whole being, your physical, emotional, mental life, in an environment that is conducive to sounding the note of your true self. It's like when I go to visit the Rourke Museum in New York City. Getting there is always difficult, but once you're there, it's like you've reached your destination, your home. You walk into this incredible museum that feels like an ashram, and you go up to the second and third floors and see the incredible art, the harmony, the beauty, the essence of life itself that is found in these paintings. And all of a sudden, these three bodies, physical, emotional, mental bodies that make up the personality, are in alignment. And you find yourself removing yourself from that life into an incarnation of incredible magnificence. It's just, and it's never gotten old. It always seems like a new experience. In true striving, we will have communication with our true self. In communication with the true self, we will come to an understanding of Christ and infinite wisdom. Communication is a dialogue with the great self, the cosmic self, and the true self. We will choose the right things at the right time for the right purpose, and then follow that path. In other words, communication with the true self gives us our inner guidance. In striving, we will become creative. We are not going to create things for ourselves, for our own glory, not to raise our reputation for praise or for flattery, but to serve humanity. We are going to create for humanity and to make our life a better life. We must first conceive ourselves. And the way we conceive ourselves is through communication with the true self. So creativity means to change our substance and to change our life, or even to create a new life. So this is what we are going to try to do, to create a new beginning for this year. To change our substance. It's like to better understand the concept of substance, think of all the ingredients that go into this cake you have been baking for years and years and years. And nobody really likes the cake, but it's tradition. It's a cake you bake for New Year's Day, let's say. Okay, and it's like we all politely eat the cake. Okay, so we're going to change the ingredients of that cake because we've noticed that it's not healthy, for example. Okay, and so on and so forth. So we begin to pull this ingredient and that and that and this and create a new cake, even though it may look the same on the outside. It's now created of new ingredients or better substance. And so we serve that cake, and everybody's expecting you to taste the very same old way. And all of a sudden, they wake up and realize, wow, this is different. This is healthy and it's good. It's actually good. Wow. Okay. Creativity means to change your substance and change your life, or to create a new life. Some people think that to be creative, we must be an artist, but what does it mean to be an artist? An artist is a creative extension of the Most High. An artist is a creative extension of the Most High. An artist sublimates and transforms people. He breaks their limitations. He unites. There is material striving and spiritual striving. This morning we are talking about spiritual striving, for that will be our focus for this coming year. Spiritual striving is beingness. It means to keep ourselves free from limitation. It means to keep ourselves constantly progressive. So what can be our limitations? We do not let our physical urges and drives to dominate us. Our emotional actions and reactions, our thought forms, or even our knowledge, for even knowledge can become our limitations. Our knowledge, our faith, our religion, our tradition, just like Eleanor Roosevelt was talking about, can become our own limitation. So she began to break through that old tradition that her grandmother was so happy with. Striving is our effort to continuously break these limitations. So in spiritual striving, we expand our consciousness and we become, listen to this, we become our own vision. In spiritual striving, we labor to continuously break these limitations. So that was striving. Okay, courage is the next keynote you may want to choose, or virtue. In every action of courage, we will have contact with our true self. In this contact, we're going to be selfless. And we will engage in careful planning and contemplation. To be courageous means to give yourself for others, to detach yourself from your self-pity, fears, touchiness, and insecurities. You're going to stand for the true rights of others. You will protect them from every kind of evil attack, or any kind of evil attack. But you do this without expectation. None of us can have virtue if we are not sacrificial in our own life. Selflessness is the road that leads us to our true self. Now, courage cannot be attained in one day. We have to work for it, and not just for a few weeks. But the teaching says you have to work for courage for centuries. Every little act of selfless service, every little act of welcoming risks on behalf of others slowly carries you up to your true self. One day I was reading a story about a man who described courage as disrupting his comfort zone. He wrote, "Disrupting my comfort zone, bombarding myself with challenging people and situations, this is the best way I know to keep growing." And to paraphrase a biologist he once met, if you're not growing, you're dying. Okay, I'm going to jump through the rest of that story, but we get the idea, right? Okay. The third keynote or virtue that you may want to choose is service. Service is a virtue of our inner lotus, just like striving. We are told that service is the measuring rod by which to evaluate a person. Wow, is that different? You know, measuring rod. We evaluate others by their service. Some people will measure the value of a person by his titles, monies, position, and diplomas, like with Downton Abbey. That's going to come on TV pretty soon. Yay. But think about that. When the first, this fourth series of the season comes in, think about this. Service is the best measure that we can have to evaluate a person. Service is the radiation of ourself through our expressions. From the teaching, it says, after we come in contact with the virtues latent within our soul, we begin to radiate. So what are we going to radiate? Beauty, love, simplicity, compassion, pure reason, and kindness. The most important part of this process is that we charge all of our activities with these virtues. What I have found, it's very interesting, it's maybe a mystery. There is no way we can recognize these virtues in others until they begin to express themselves from within the core of our being. So, for example, when we begin to express beauty in our life, that's when we can see the measure of beauty in others. But if we don't have an expression of beauty flowing from our inner core, we're not going to be able to recognize beauty flowing from the core of another being. And the same with love and simplicity and compassion and kindness and pure reason. There are 5 steps that will lead us into a life of service. The first step is we select a need. We select a need that is not personal and it is not self-serving. It's very important. If you want to write this down, do it. If you want to engage in service, the first step is to select a need that is not personal or self-serving. The second step is to make preparations to meet the need, and then to consider the ways that you're going to meet that need. The third step is an inner response to the need. It's got to be an inner response. It cannot come from the concrete mind. It must come from the core of your being. It is at first the urge to do something for someone. And when this occurs, you release joy from your innermost core. The fourth step is meditation on soul virtues. For example, to meditate on goodness and beauty and simplicity and so on. And to meditate, if you're not a meditator that takes 15 to 30 minutes out of your day in the morning, you can at least think about it. Learn to recognize goodness, in the world today. Learn to recognize simplicity. It's not hard to recognize simplicity. And the reason it's not hard to recognize simplicity is because the world is so complex. Okay, so when you recognize simplicity, don't misunderstand it as being simplistic. When we recognize simplicity in the world, we're recognizing a manifestation of the plan from hierarchy or from the lords of Shambhala, because their plan is simple. When we begin to execute their plans, that's when the complexities come in. The fifth step is the actual performance of the service as a result of inner radiation. The actual performance of the service as a result of our inner radiation, or the inner radiation of the group. If these 5 steps are scientifically carried out, we will feel the release of energy and compassion from our innermost self. As our field of service increases, the downflow of energy and compassion increases, creating greater beauty, greater unity, and greater simplicity. Thus we become a shining light in an ever-expanding field of service. Let your light shine, said the great Lord. And let me wrap it up this morning with this. If our vices, inertia, glamours, illusions, or ignorance, or wrong motives are stopping us on the path, and we are becoming an obstacle for our advancing soul, and for the souls of others, it will be a great service for us to remove these obstacles and to make ourselves a bridge, a cable, a link, which lets the divine flow circulate and do its liberating work.